Minutes of me, and then the real item comes out. I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to thank you all for putting up with us as we deal for the first time in a long time with a crowd this size. Right? My board and I have made some changes to the Phoenix Club this year to try and make it more welcoming and inclusive, and apparently it's working. I just want each of you to know that we're genuinely glad that each of you is here. Thank you very much for coming tonight. It means a lot to us. I'm Mike Wyrick, and I'm the chair of the Lynn Phoenix Club. If you're a first-timer or a guest today, know that we would love to have you as an actual member. If you have any interest in that, please see one of my board members or me after the event, or feel free to go to lynnphoenixclub.org for more information. Now, most of you already know about Lynn Phoenix Club, but just in case you don't, here's our story. Our mission is simple: to get more Democrats elected to office in Lynn County. We do this by raising money through memberships and event fees, and then we give that money out to Democratic candidates in targeted county-wide races where we think we can really help push our candidates over the finish line to a win. You might ask, why is this important? Well, you're starting to see this year what gaining control of the U.S. House has done for our country. Here in Iowa, yes. Here in Iowa, we must take back either the Iowa House, the Iowa Senate, or both in 2020. We just simply can't leave the GOP unchecked here any longer. I'd like to thank CSPS for making our last-minute venue change work. Special thanks to Mel. And I'd like to thank my board, especially Nate Williams, who secures our speakers, and Libby Slappy, who helps me with all of the details of everything. Details not one of my long suits. So. And one more board member and also elected official, Ashley Van Orney, who's on our city council. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce a speaker who really needs no introduction. The first woman elected to the Senate from Massachusetts in 2012, Elizabeth Warren has described her family of origin as, quote, teetering on the ragged edge of the middle class and kind of hanging on at the edges by our fingernails. As an adult, she's taught children with disabilities, law school students, and Sunday school. She's positioned herself as a champion of a beleaguered middle class that's been, and I quote, chipped, squeezed, and hammered, and she has said, people feel like the system is rigged against them, and here's the painful part, they're right, the system is rigged. She was formerly a prominent scholar specializing in bankruptcy law. She's been a noted progressive leader, and she's focused on things like consumer protection, opportunity for all, and the social safety net while she's been in the Senate. Now, please allow me just one quick story that I love. During the debate on the nomination of Senator Jeff Sessions for the United States Attorney General in February of 2017, Senator Warren quoted a letter that Coretta Scott King had written to Senator Strom Thurmond in 1986 when Sessions was nominated for a federal judgeship. Ms. King had written, Mr. Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens in the district he now seeks to serve as a federal judge. This simply cannot be allowed to happen. Senate Republicans voted that by reading the letter from King, Senator Warren had violated Senate Rule 19, which prohibits impugning another senator's character. What she actually did was speak truth to power, and we need more of that these days. In rebuking Warren, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said on the Senate floor, She was warned. She was given an explanation. And nevertheless, she persisted. We're so glad you did. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of drinks and yawn and stretch and try to come to life.
Hello, Cedar Rapids! Woo! And hello, Lynn Phoenix Club. Fabulous! It is so good to be here. Thank you, Mike, for the introduction and for the invitation to everybody here who's not already a member to join the Lynn Phoenix Club. It is a worthy cause. So I just want to start by saying how glad I am to be here with all of you. So glad, in fact, that I brought family. My husband, Bruce, is with us. Stand up, sweetheart. This is actually Bruce's first event in Iowa. He's been teaching all term, and this is his first chance to be off, so I hope I do a good job. Okay, he's watching. Okay, I really am pleased to be here tonight, and I thought maybe what we would do is I would tell you a little bit about myself. I tell you a little bit about the things I'm fighting for, and then we'll take as many questions as we can. Mike is going to be the referee on that one. And then afterwards, I'll stay as long as anybody wants if you want to do any pictures. So that's the fun part. Good to see you. Good to see you. So anyway, I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I have 3 much older brothers. I was what used to be known as a late-in-life baby. My mother always just called me the surprise. All 3 of my older brothers went off and joined the military. My oldest brother, Don Reed, spent about 5.5 years off and on in combat in Vietnam. We were very lucky to get him back home. My brother, John, was stationed overseas for a little over a year, and my brother, David, trained as a combat medic. Now, all 3 of my brothers now are retired. They're all back in Oklahoma. They all live fairly close to each other. And we have a rule in our family. And the rule in our family is never choke in front of David. The reason is because, having trained as a combat medic, he still carries a very sharp pocket knife and is convinced that he could perform an emergency tracheotomy. He's convinced. So it makes for some very exciting Thanksgivings. Anybody goes, and David's like, I'm ready. And the rest of us are backing out of the room. I'm very close to my brothers. I love my brothers. When we were growing up, as Mike said, my daddy had a lot of different jobs. He sold paint. He sold fencing. He sold housewares. He sold carpeting. And then when I was in middle school, the boys, and they are to this day referred to as the boys were all gone by then, and it was just my mama and my daddy and me. And my daddy had a massive heart attack. And we thought we were going to lose him. Folks from the church came by with covered dishes. The neighbors came. Now, Daddy pulled through, but he couldn't work for a long, long time. And we lost the family station wagon. And at night, my mama would tuck me into bed, and then I'd lie in bed in the dark, and I'd hear him talk. And that's where I learned words like mortgage and foreclosure. And one morning I walked into my folks' bedroom, and there on the bed was the dress. Now, some of you know the dress. It's the one that only comes out for weddings, funerals, and graduations. And the dress is on the bed, and my mother is in her slip and her stockings. And she's crying, and she's pacing. And she's saying, we will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. She was 50 years old. She had never worked outside the home, and she was terrified. And she kept looking at that dress, and she looked over at me and back at that dress. And finally, she blew her nose, she pulled the dress on, she put on her high heels, and she walked to the Sears and got a minimum wage job answering the phones. Now, that minimum wage job saved our house and it saved our family. And for many, many years, from the time I was a girl until I was well into being a young woman, I thought that was just a story that my mother taught me about how, no matter how scared you are, no matter how hard it looks, you dig down deep, you find what you need to find, you pull it up, and you take care of the people you love. It was years later that I came to understand, it's not just the story of my mother, it's the story of millions of people all across this country who, no matter how scared they are, no matter how hard it looks, they reach down deep, they find what they need to find, they pull it up, and they take care of the people they love. And it was only years after that that I came to understand it's also a story about government. Because when I was a girl, a minimum wage job, full-time, in America would support a family of 3. It would pay a mortgage, it would cover the utilities, and it would put food on the table. Today, a minimum wage job full-time in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong, and that is why I am in this fight. That's it. So, think about why that has happened. It isn't just an accident. It's not like gravity or inflation or something caused this to happen. I'll tell you exactly why it happened. It happened because of a decision made in far-off Washington. That's why I say this is a point about government. The question that Congress used to ask in setting the minimum wage was, what does it take a family of 3 to survive? What will give them a toehold in America's middle class? A chance that they can get started and build something from there and build some real security. It's the bottom level, but it's a foot in the door. Today, the question that gets asked in Washington is, what is the minimum wage that will maximize the profits of giant multinational corporations? Well, I don't want a government that's there to work for giant multinational corporations. I want one that's there to work for our families. Yeah. So, I've known since 2nd grade what I wanted to be when I grew up. I know not everybody. Some of you waited until 3rd grade, 4th grade before you figured out, but not me. I've known since 2nd grade. I wanted to be a public school teacher. Can we hear? Oh man, this is what I wanted. And I just want you to know, I used to actually work on this. I'd line my dollies up and teach school. I was tough but fair. Now, the thing is, the 3 boys had all gone off to the military. That was their ticket to America's middle class back then. Me, I was going to have a 4-year college diploma, because that's the only way you get to be a public school teacher. By the time I graduated from high school, we didn't have the money for a college application, much less money to send me off to 4 years of college. However, I got a scholarship. Yay! And then at 19, I fell in love. Yay! And got married. Yay! The first time. Yay! Not that guy. And I dropped out of school and took a job answering phones. A good life, but just not the one I'd wanted. And I thought that was going to be it for me forever. And then I found a commuter college about 45 minutes away, and it cost $50 a semester. That was my big chance, and I held on for dear life. I got my 4-year diploma. I became a special needs teacher. I have lived my dream. Now, I love that work. In fact, it isn't work. It is a calling. And I probably would still be doing it today, except life has a lot of twists and turns. And by the end of the first year, I was visibly pregnant. And this is back in the day when the principal, oh yes, when the principal wished you good luck, showed you the door, and hired someone else for the job. So I'm home. I got a baby. I can't get a full-time job. What am I going to do? And I make this crazy decision to head off to law school, baby on my hip. By the way, a public law school. It costs $450 a semester. So 3 years of law school, I graduate, visibly pregnant. You will notice a pattern to this. Amelia, who by that time is about 4.5. And I practice law for 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and go straight back to my first love, which is teaching. I traded little ones for very tall ones, and taught in law school for a long time. And I taught all of the money courses. Contract law, commercial law, corporate finance, bankruptcy law, all the stuff in money, economics, business. But there was always one central question that guided all of my work, what I worked on for all of my career. And that is, what's happening to working families in America? Why is America's middle class being hollowed out? Why is it that people who today work every bit as hard as my mother worked a generation ago are finding the path so much rockier and steeper, and for people of color, even rockier and even steeper? And the answer, it's much like the answer around minimum wage. It is not an accident. It is, in large part, about a series of decisions that have been made in far-off Washington. It's a question of who this government works for. Think of it this way. Right now, in this country, our government works great for giant drug companies, just not for people trying to get a prescription filled. Think about that. It works great for giant financial institutions, just not for families trying to make it paycheck to paycheck without getting ripped off. It works great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, but not for people who are feeling the effects of climate change bearing down upon us. Whatever the issue that brought you here today, whatever is the one thing that gets you up in the morning, I can almost guarantee that if it involves a decision to be made in Washington, it gets touched and influenced by money. That place is awash in money, and it's not just campaign contributions, it's everywhere. Think of it this way, climate change. Go back and read, in the 90s, early 90s, America's beginning to tumble the world is beginning to tumble, the scientific community is beginning to tumble to, whoa, big changes. We don't have it all right at that point, don't have all the right answers, but starting to move in that direction. And you see that Democrats and Republicans are working together on what do we need to do so that we don't have a crisis. How do we avert a crisis? And they're working together. It's a kind of bipartisan approach to the whole problem. And then what happens? The Koch brothers, yeah, who make their money in carbon-based fuels, right? The Koch brothers take a look at what's going on in Washington. And by the way, along with the oil companies, along with a lot of big corporations who say it would be expensive to have to stop spewing stuff into the air or poison into the water, they all say, you know, if Washington really gets serious about climate change, it's going to cost us money, maybe a lot of money. So what did they invest in? Did they invest in new technology and scrubbers to try to keep carbon out of the air? Did they invest in making the move from carbon-based to green and renewable energies? Not really. They invested in politicians. They invested in bought and paid for experts to do reports that raised doubts about what we knew about climate change. Why? Not because they weren't smart, not because they really did have doubts, but because those doubts created enough umbrella for politicians to continue to take their campaign contributions and say, oh, I don't know what's going on with climate change. And that is why we face a crisis today that we should have been working on for the past 25 years. Yep. So here's how I see this. We have a government that works great for those with money. A government that works great for those who can hire an army of lobbyists, an army of lawyers, an army of bought and paid for experts. A government that works great for those who can make giant campaign contributions, but a government that is not working for the rest of us. And when you've got a government that works for those with money and not for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple, and we should call it out for what it is. So here's the deal. We have got to make change in this country, and when I say change, I don't mean like one statute over here, a couple of regulations over there, a different person in office over here. I mean big structural change in this country. Yes. And you don't come to Iowa without having some ideas about exactly how to make that change. So, I got a plan. Part one. Attack corruption head on. Just straight at it. Call it out and hit it straight on. Now, here's the good news. I have the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. Here's the bad news. We need the biggest anti-corruption plan since Watergate. So, this one has got a lot of moving parts to it. There are a lot of pieces in it. I'm just going to give you some highlights so you take a look at them, get the flavor for it. First one, end lobbying as we know it. Change the rules around this. Block the revolving door between Wall Street and Washington. Enough! Oh! How about one for the Supreme Court? Make the Supreme Court follow basic rules of ethics, which they don't do on conflicts of interest. Okay, I could do these all day long. I'm just going to do one more. Anyone who wants to run for federal office should have to put their tax returns online. Yep. All right, so that's plan one. I like that. That's plan one, attack corruption head on. Plan two, we've got to change a couple of the basic rules in this economy. And it's structural again. That's how you then get to the rest of the pieces. So let me just give you a couple of ideas around this. First one is around giant corporations. You know, basically big corporations in America, they pretty much roll wherever they want to roll, however they want to roll. They want to roll over their own employees, they do it. They want to roll over their customers, they do it. They want to roll over the communities where they're located. They do it, right? And who's there to stop them? we need structural change, and that means more power in the hands of employees. We need to make it easier to join a union, and we need to give those unions more power. Unions built America's middle class, and unions will rebuild America's middle class. I'll give you a second way we can think about restructuring this economy. A way to make it more progressive. I'll tell you how. Start with a wealth tax on the biggest fortunes in this country. So I have a proposal. It's a 2-cent proposal. Here's the proposal. The first $50 million of your estate, right? Not estate, your fortune. That's fine. No extra tax on that. But I know some people said, phew, okay? But the 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to kick in 2 cents. And 2 cents on every dollar afterwards. This is basically the fortunes that are the biggest 1/10 of 1% in this country. Okay, and just so you all understand this, the point is not to be punitive. The point is simply to say, look, you got out there, you had a great idea, you worked hard, you built this great fortune, or inherited it. But either way, that fortune was built in part using employees all of us helped to educate. That fortune was built in part getting your goods to market on roads and bridges all of us helped to pay for. That fortune was built in part protected by firefighters and police officers all of us helped to pay for. So you made it big, good for you, but put in 2 cents so everybody else has a chance to make it in America. Now here's the magic. If they put in the 2 cents, this is my proposal, the ultra millionaires wealth tax, top 75,000 fortunes in this country, 2 cents on everything above $50 million. If they pitch it in, let me tell you what we could do right now in America. We could provide universal child care for every one of our babies age 0 to 5. Yeah. Universal pre-K and pre-pre-K for our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Oh, and wages for our child care workers and our pre-K workers that are professional level. I'm not through yet. And universal college, public college, 2-year colleges, technical colleges for all our kids. And one more, and that is cancel student loan debt for about 95% of the kids who have student loan debt outstanding. We could do all of those things with a 2-cent tax, all of those things, and still have nearly $1 trillion left over. It tells you just how badly skewed this economy has become, that 2 cents on the great fortunes can produce the kind of revenue that lets us invest in a future for all of our kids. That's what we could do together. Okay, so that's part 2. We need to rewrite some of the rules in this economy. Part 3, we need to rewrite some of the rules in politics to protect our democracy. I want to see a constitutional amendment to protect the right of every American citizen to vote and to get that vote counted. Roll back every one of these voter suppression laws to keep people from voting. Shameful. And just one more. Overturn Citizens United. Democracy is not for sale. So just 3 things. Attack the corruption head on, restructure a couple of the basic rules in this economy, and protect our democracy. And for me, these 3 things are all deeply related to each other, because what they're ultimately about is opportunity. Who gets an opportunity in this country? You know, for me, it's about every kid gets a chance to get an education. Everybody gets a chance to get a good job, to be able to start a business, to be able to go back to the family farm, to be able to move where they want to move, to start a family. People should get those chances and understand, I'm a special needs teacher. Sometimes getting a chance is just about the opportunity to live independently. But it's a chance for everybody. Because here's how I see this. My daddy, he ended up as a janitor. But his baby daughter, she got a chance, an opportunity to become a public school teacher, to become a college professor, to become a United States senator, and to become a candidate for president of the United States. Let's go.
So thank you, Senator Warren. And I admitted earlier that I'm not especially good on details, but I make up for that by being extra bossy. So we're going to take questions now, and thank you for doing this, Senator. Appreciate it. And here's how it's going to work. Whoever's asking the questions is going to come up to these microphones in the corner, and I want 2 people that I will call on from this side and 2 people that I will call on from this side to come to each of these microphones, and I'll give you the first 2 questions. We'll see how long those take, and we'll go from there. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Jillian. Yes, and yes.
All righty. We got 4 people here, Mike?
Yep.
All right, let's do this. Hi. Hi, tell me your name.
Jillian from Cedar
Jillian.
Rapids. Thank you
Cedar
so much.
Rapids, good to see you.
I have started a local sunrise movement here.
Yes.
Thank you. We are fighting every day to stop climate change.
Yep.
It is crushing my heart that I am not giving my kids the same viable earth that I was given just 32 years ago. Mm-hmm. You've co-signed the Green New Deal. Thank you. How do we get it done?
Okay. All right. So thank you, and thanks for the question. Thanks for the work you're doing with Sunrise. It's very important. Let me just start by saying what I was doing last week. God, it feels like a year ago, right? The way things move. But I was in South Carolina meeting with folks from coastal communities who are fighting offshore drilling because they are afraid it will destroy not only their homes but also their livelihoods. A lot of fishermen in the group and all. I went from there to Colorado, where they were having the worst drought in 1,200 years. Yeah. And from there to Utah, where the wildfire season last summer was the worst in over a generation. The effects of climate are felt differently everywhere around the country. I don't have to come to Iowa to talk about this in a place that hasn't yet dried out from the floods. But it's everywhere around us. I have an 8-year-old grandson, and I think a lot about what the world will look like by the time he's 38. Will it be a world where Many of our coastal cities are below water most of the time, at 3 feet of water standing in them. Will it be a world where the center part of the United States has simply dried out or burned up from wildfires? Will it be an Earth where big parts of the ocean are simply dead from these floating islands of plastic and waste and that are killing off marine life? So I think of this as an urgent problem. Urgent because every day that goes by, it gets that much harder to reverse where we are. And an urgent moral question. I like how you frame this, Jillian. It's a question of what was given to us and what we're passing to the next generation. So let's talk about what we can do to change it. First part is I have embraced the Green New Deal. I'm there. And good. But let me tell you why. Because there are two parts to it that I think are absolutely critical. It's mostly just an outline at this point, but it does two things. It highlights the urgency of the problem and says we're going to put this front and center and start working on it right now, which is critical. You don't get anything done if it's down low on the list, especially if it costs people money. The second reason I like it is a big infrastructure bill. I mean, that's really what this is about. It's about building a new infrastructure for America. And it's partly about an infrastructure around green energy, around a new power grid, around transportation. It's partly about hardening our infrastructure against what's headed our way, so the water doesn't overflow the dams, so that we are able to contain as we deal with worse and worse storms that are coming our way. So that's part one, is that I support the Green New Deal. And this is going to be one that's going to take, we got to get this through Congress. So whenever we talk about why are we in this room, it's about winning the White House, but it's also about hanging on to the House of Representatives and taking back the United States Senate so we can make the changes we need to make. But that's not all we can do. This is what priorities are about, and this is about remembering what a committed president can do. So let me just give you one piece. On the first day of my administration, when I'm sworn in, I will put in place a moratorium that there will be no new mining and no new drilling on any federal lands or offshore in America. We can do that. I'll give you one more. I'll put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. Not because those are high enough standards, but to show our commitment. The United States is a world leader on climate. The problem is right now we're leading in the wrong direction. And we are giving cover to countries around the world and to corporations around the world who don't want to have to spend the money, who don't want to have to clean up. We need to be leading in the opposite direction. We need to be leading toward a clean earth for our children, a sustainable earth for our children. So that's just part of it, but count me in all the way. I'm in. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth, thanks so much for being here. It's
Sure.
good to see a fellow lawyer where the next administration might have some concept of the Constitution where the current administration doesn't.
Oh, there is that.
So, I spent a number of years in higher education.
Tell me your name.
My name is Eric Langston. Lovely
Hi,
to
Eric.
meet you.
It's good to
I
see you.
spent a number of years in higher education, and I wanted to ask about your policy therein. Given that higher education's tuition model price discriminates against the most wealthy, and that scholarships such as the one you received are available for the needy, why would free college not, in fact, benefit the wealthy who are, after all, more likely to attend college in the first place?
Okay, so I wrestled a lot with this on college, and let's do a couple of rounds of this. The first one is, let's go back a little over 100 years ago. Late 1800s, as a country, America looked around and said, you know what? We're going to need a better educated people here in this country. Workers are going to have to be able to read more complex instructions. People are going to have to do more complex math than they had to do before. And so as a country, what we said is high school for everybody, and we made it free for everybody. We wanted everybody in because that is the meaning of public education. Is everybody's in, everybody's got a chance to do this. Now we are in the first part of the 21st century, and it has simply become the case that to make it in America, you gotta have education beyond high school. It may be technical training, it may be 2-year college, it may be 4-year college, but you've got to have an investment in your future. You gotta be able to do more than what K through 12 will now produce. So how are we best gonna do that? My view is we invest in public colleges and universities. But here's the really terrible part about what's happened, and let's just talk for a minute about the racial wealth divide in America and how it starts, a big part of this, with educational opportunities. Did you know that across this country, a black child graduating from high school has exactly half the chance of going on and graduating from college as a white kid? And for both of them, it's tough. Going to a state university today, more than 70% of the kids will have to borrow money to make it through. And what has been America's response to that? Our federal government, we say you gotta have some post-high school education. We just all say it. And the federal government says, good luck to you, you're on your own. Oh no, they do a little more than that. They say, we'll lend you tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And by the way, right here in Iowa, this is one of the places where kids are carrying, on average, about $30,000 in debt after they graduate from a public university. Think about that. The tuition costs have been going up and up and up. Why? Because taxpayer investment, public investment in public education has been going down and down and down. So here's what I've proposed. I've proposed in the first place that we say our public technical schools, colleges, and universities up to the 4-year diploma are public. And that means we do them tuition free. Tuition fee and free fee. Fee free. Now, that won't entirely close the gap for poor kids. It won't entirely close the gap for kids who are starting in families that don't have as much. The cost of being in a dorm, living in a dorm, the cost of commuting expenses, the cost of books, if you already have kids, the cost of childcare, all those things mount up so that among the poorest, they still don't go. They still don't end up going to college, and this is part of the reason we continue to have this gap. So the second part of what I've done is I've said we need to double down on our Pell Grants, both on expanding who can get them and expanding the money that they can spend, what they can spend it on. The idea is to even out your chance to be able to go to school, whether you come from a rich family, whether you come from a middle-class family, or whether you come from a poor family. Everybody's got a shot to get in the door. And then the third part, as I identified for you, is canceling student loan debt. And the proposal here is we just have to pick a time and a number for this. Young people have taken on an unmanageable amount of debt. I can't tell you what it's been like. I've been running for president now for what, 4.5 months? And here's 3.5 months. Here's what it's like. People walk up to me when I do the photo lines afterwards, and they say, hi, my name is Abby, and I have $42,000 worth of debt, and I'm never going to pay it off. Hi, my name is Michelle. I teach public school, and I work 2 additional jobs, and those paychecks go to nothing but paying off my student loan debt. Hi, my name is Brett, and I work as an investment banker because I can't afford to go back to the small town I grew up in. Working as an investment banker is the only way I can make the nut on my student loan payments. I talk to people who are so far behind, who borrowed $22,000 to make it in school and now owe $100,000 in student loan debt. Right now, in this country, there's $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. There is more student loan debt right now in America outstanding than there is all the credit card debt and all the car loan debt put together. And understand this part. It not only touches individual lives, it not only touches the lives of people who are working 3 jobs, people who can't become public teachers or firefighters, because they can't afford it because of the student loan debt it took to get them on through school. It not only touches their grandparents who guaranteed those loans. I meet people now whose Social Security checks are being garnished because their grandchildren can't pay the student loan debt, and now it's coming back to grandma to have to pay the student loan debt. It not only touches their lives, 43 million people in America and their families, it touches all of us. It touches all of us because it has an impact on this entire economy. This student loan debt burden is holding back our economy. Young people in this country, we can now see it in the numbers, are not buying homes at the rates we would expect them to do it. National Association of Realtors, for example, is strongly behind dealing with the student loan debt burden so that people can get into the housing market. Young people are not able to start jobs. Watch this part. Who gets to do the startup? Right? Not the kid who's got a ton of student loan debt. Doesn't matter how good his idea or her idea is. If you're sitting there looking at a student loan debt payment every month of hundreds of dollars, you can't say, I'll take a flyer on this business, I'll live on ramen noodles, I can make this work. So, what do we do about that? We make public education public. We put enough resources into it so it's meaningful access for every kid, and we knock back this student loan debt burden for about 95% of the kids out there. That's what we can do. And just one more point about this, because it is a progressive point. How do we pay for it? We pay for it with a 2-cent tax on the biggest 75,000 fortunes built in this country. That's how we do this. I think this is what lets us build a future. Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Good question. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Ellickson.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi. And I sit on the Affordable Housing Commission for the City of Cedar Rapids.
Yay!
I also work with individuals who are homeless to try and get them back into housing. And I know, like your Senate colleagues, you have said that housing is a human right.
Yes.
And I know that you have an affordable housing plan, because you always have a plan for that.
I do.
And so
I have a plan.
my question is, what is your plan for the hardest to house? So the folks that I work with who are often severely mentally ill, who may not want treatment or may not be ready for treatment, people with substance abuse or criminal histories.
Okay, it's a great question. Thank you, Lindsay. So let's talk housing for just a minute, okay? We got a problem across America, and here's the basic structure of the problem. 2 things have shifted in producing housing supply in America. The first one is what's happened on the private side. Private developers build mansions today. They don't build the 2-bedroom, 1-bath house I grew up in, where they converted the garage for my 3 brothers to sleep in. But they're not building that house, and I'm not mad at them. The profits are just better at the top. So if you want to buy a McMansion, there's plenty of supply. But if you're looking for the 2-bedroom, 1-bath, if you're looking for something more affordable, the new supply is not coming online. Second thing that's changed is the federal government's not putting money in the way it was putting money in a generation ago. So I keep looking at and what this means ultimately is we have a growing population, it's growing all across America. Housing deteriorates over time, unless you can afford to keep it up, right? And the supply is not increasing. So that means for everybody, and I'm going to do this one all the way across, Lindsay, if that's okay, who's middle class, who's working poor, who's poor, and who's homeless. Everybody is in the housing squeeze because it's less housing for more money. And for people who have special housing needs, for seniors, for people with disabilities, for people who are being brought in from homelessness, it's just not there. I mean, that's just the basic reality. There's just not nearly enough to deal with it. So various folks, I really tried to dig into this. When they talk about different ways to approach this, we'll get people more housing vouchers. No, you've got to create more supply. That's where we are. So my housing plan is to build 3.2 million new units of housing across this country. It's about building them in cities. It's about building it in rural areas. It's about building it in small towns. And it's about doing it in all the different ways. Some of it is about affordable housing. Some of it is about housing for seniors. Some of it is about housing for people with disabilities. Some of it is about partnering up to make it easier to get private developers back in to other parts of the market. So for example, offering part of the money or offering cheaper financing to do it, or even offering, if areas will go together and say, we're gonna do some denser housing here, the federal government can be the one to put up the money to put the exit off the highway ramp or to build a new elementary school, if that's what it's gonna take. Encouraging best practices by local communities, it's a lot. It's ultimately the federal government trying to be a good partner to the communities that understand they gotta have more housing if they're gonna continue to flourish and grow. So that's the basic housing plan. Yes, it's paid for. I do all of these paid for. This one is about inheritance tax, again, on the very top, I admit it. But the basic idea behind it is to acknowledge there are these core pieces in America that we have so underinvested in for so long. And we've tried to hold it together. Our kids have borrowed money to go to school. We've upped how much we spend on rent and on mortgages. We've done all the pieces. Childcare. You know, with the cost of childcare over the last generation adjusted for inflation, has gone up nearly 1,000%. Families just can't do this. Also, so that people with pre-existing conditions don't get discriminated against. I think that's kind of an important one. And once we're back in control, we need to pick the low-hanging fruit, and that means reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We can do that one quickly. And I support Medicare for all. It is the cheapest way to make sure that we get everyone covered at the lowest possible cost. So I'm in on this. But I want to make a slightly different point about healthcare, since I know that Mike's going to give me the hook here in just a sec. When we think about healthcare, and we think about how we're going to do this, how we're going to make sure that everybody gets covered, how we're going to make sure that women continue to get covered by healthcare, but that everyone is covered. Here's a way I hope everybody thinks about this. When the Republicans decided to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act, you remember this? Yeah, you remember this. It's been almost 2 years ago now, right? And you remember they were rolling back the Affordable Care Act. And I think a big part of that, because it was associated with President Obama, and if it was associated with President Obama, they wanted it gone, right? Yeah, just be blunt about it. But it's true. But there was more to it. While they were in there trying to roll back the Affordable Care Act, they were also taking a big thwack out of Medicaid. And the idea was nobody would notice and that nobody would fight for Medicaid. Because Medicaid is something, it's them, it's not us, it's not really us, right? It's poor people, right? It's not us. Except 2 out of every 3 seniors living in a nursing home counts on Medicaid to help pay the bills. Anybody in here know anyone who's had mental health issues? Well, opioid issues addiction issues, yeah, the odds are very good that if they got medical treatment, it was paid for by Medicaid. And anybody in here know anyone whose family, baby, had a baby that ran up $1 million in the first month of life? Oh, lots of you. Even if the parents had good, terrific, top-of-the-line health insurance, it's Medicaid that pays for the speech therapist and the occupational therapist and the special breathing equipment and the special feeding equipment. That's Medicaid. So here's how I look at this. We don't know whose grandma is going to outlive her savings. We don't know whose beloved sister or cousin is going to get caught in the grips of addiction or mental health problems. We don't know whose beloved niece is going to have the baby that's going to run up $1 million in medical care. But what we do know is that as Americans, we're all going to pitch in something. So if it happens to your family or to your family or to your family, we're all going to be there for each other. To me, Medicaid is the best statement of what it means to be an American. So I'm in this fight all the way. Thank you. Thank you. Mike, you going to wrap this up? Can I say a final word?
Yes, please do.
When you're ready. You want to do it?
Yeah.
Or you want me to?
Well, I've got just a couple things to say.
Okay.
Thank
you say
you.
a couple?
How about if I turn this on?
So
Thank you for coming to speak to us today.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for being here. If you're not already on the Lynn Phoenix Club mailing list or emailing list, come see me and we'll fix that right up. You can also like Lynn Phoenix Club on Facebook to stay on top of what we've got going on. And then here's the good news. Can I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. So we couldn't take any more questions, but the senator has agreed to do photo ops with people. And if you'd like to do that, please line up stage left down this row. And then we'll come across the front, and you can go out the door. So thanks again, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
So let me say, before everybody gets up and moves, let me just say thanks again to Lynn Phoenix Club. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And one more thing. I just want to do 3 things. I want to attack corruption head on. I want to rewrite some of the basic rules in our economy. And I want to protect our democracy. 3 things. When I go back to Washington, when I first started talking about this, after I'd been here in Iowa, some of my colleagues in the Senate came up to me and said, "You're asking for too much. You should take a smaller bite. You should ask for less. You should, just make this a little easier, a few baby steps, smile more." Because what you're asking for is too hard. And I found myself thinking, what do you think they said to the abolitionists? "You'll never change America. It's just too hard." What did they say to the suffragettes? "It's just too hard. Give up now." What did they say to the early union organizers? "Too hard. Give up now." What did they say to the foot soldiers in the civil rights movement? "Too hard. You'll never change America. Just give up now." What did they say to the LGBTQ activists who wanted equal marriage? "Whoa, too hard. Give up now." But none of them gave up. They got organized. They fought back. They built a grassroots movement. They persisted. And they changed the course of American history. Let's dream big, fight hard, and do